All right. So this is going to be skill 1. I should have put that here. So this is skill number 1, which is rhetorical situation analysis. So this is what we will see when we, what your typical prompt will look like. So let me walk you through it, and then we'll talk about it. So at 8:30 p.m. on September 11th, 2001, President George W. Bush delivered an address to the nation regarding the attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the hijacked airplane that crashed in rural Pennsylvania. Read the passage carefully. Write an essay that analyzes the rhetorical choices Bush makes to convey his purpose of reaffirming the country's strength. All right, so let me this is a typical prompt for us, so let me tell you all the pieces and parts. So there will always be some kind of date, something for you to reference. That's going to help us build some context, okay? There is always going to be a speaker or a writer, and it usually goes in this order, right? So there's your speaker or writer. This is going to be like the text, or like the form of the text. Is it an address? Is it a eulogy? Is it a commencement speech? Is it a letter? Is it the foreword of a book? So this is going to tell you like the form of the text, which is important because that also helps us understand like how the message is delivered and how it's being received. And then this is going to be, you're always going to have like the content or the topic. This is all like any important background information you're going to be given. Now, what is important, Cameron, can you see that all the way back there? Okay. What is important about our prompts is the College Board will give you the important information you need in order to read the passage correctly. So if there's any information about the speaker that they don't feel that you'll know or that is vital to you interpreting the passage correctly, they will tell you. What I find interesting about this prompt that I wrote is that it's given the time. So for me, I make a note of that because I think that's different. We usually get a date. We don't necessarily get a time reference, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, that's something important that I have to realize is in the prompt, okay? And then any background information that we need to fully understand kind of the context of the situation. Write an essay that, read the passage carefully. That you see all the time. So that's where your directions begin. Write an essay. This again is your directions. But we always look for our task. And our task starts with a marker verb, a rhetorically accurate verb, which is analyze. And so we will always bracket our task. Because the task will lead us to how we figure out how to read the passage, and then it will also tell us how to, what we need for our thesis. Okay, so those are the components of like a typical prompt. All the things that we are marking down in the boxes, once we get the prompt like y'all saw for Margaret Thatcher, all the stuff that we go here will be outside of your prompt. So we'll be marking down all the things outside of our prompt that we're writing here. Okay, and we'll actually practice that before we do a real-timed writing. So I'm going to start with the author or speaker because I'm going to kind of work my way through chronologically, right? So who is my author or speaker? President George Bush. So okay. So remember what we said yesterday in our notes, right? Speak, Smith. How does this author offer a distinct perspective? What do you know about them? What were some other things that I told you to write down about speaker or author that we needed to look for?
Bias.
Okay, so we need to look for any bias. Okay, what else?
Their role.
Do what?
Their role.
their role, yep, and their experiences. So those are things that we need to consider. Now, what we don't want is we don't want to just pull words from the prompt and put them in the box, right? Anybody can do that. We need to start kind of inferring about him, okay? Turn to your partner, talk to your partner. What are some things that we can infer or write down or know about George W. Bush? Ready, set, go.
What's like the situation? Talk about the that people would know.
Also, just during this time, having the come out and say something
Oh yeah, you can't speak like probably essentially says. Yeah.
and also
Good stuff.
All right.
Wow. Good.
What are we writing down? What are some things that we can write down about him?
He has the best interest for the United States.
Okay, so as his role, right? He is always has the best interest of the United States. Good.
He's like knowledgeable. He knows more than like the average person.
Yeah. Yep. Especially in this situation, right? So he knows more than the average citizen. What else? I think that would go into like the best interest, right? Like he's going to serve and protect us above all others. What else?
He has to be like careful with what he says so he doesn't like alarm people with
Okay, so because he is the president, he has to
be aware.
yeah, like be aware.
Withhold
Well,
information, maybe a little bit.
I think he has to, let's see how I'm trying to say this. He has to, like, act presidentially, or, like, act. Yeah, I mean, like, he still has to act presidential, right? Like, he still has to be that even within this. Do you know anything about his family?
Yeah, didn't someone's related to him that was president?
Who? His dad. So his father was president. And why does that matter? Yeah, I mean, not that his father experienced an attack like this, but his father, because America is always in some kind of war, his father has experienced like war, right? Like leading through a war. Okay. Now, one thing that we tend to look at, especially when we have speeches that are politically driven, and anything that is politically driven or written by like a president, we want to look at like where they are in their term. So, do you know when his election was? If this is 2001, what years are elections done? Every what?
4 years.
Good God. Every 4 years, a new president is elected. Okay? So, if this was in September 2001, do you know when his election was? November of what?
2000.
Yeah. So, he was elected in November of 2000, which means he took office when? January of 2001. Inaugurations, oh, young people. Inaugurations are always in January. Election is in November, right? Every 4 years, and then they are inaugurated and take office in January.
So he hasn't been president for too long.
For how long?
7, 8 months.
It's not an option. Like January he took office.
7 months.
9 months. Young people. Math and history and apparently government, basic government knowledge is a struggle here. So he is 9 months into his presidency. Does that make it a difference of like how he is going to act in this situation? I mean, yeah, like he is a brand new president. All right. You'll start to figure out kind of dates and stuff like that. You don't have to memorize stuff, but it helps you if you can kind of figure out where somebody is. You don't know if this is his first term or second term, but you can tell that he's 9 months into this term, right? All right. That's good for me. That works. All right. So let's look at audience. So sometimes our audience, like we can look at the address that helps us to figure out the audience. Sometimes there are hints throughout the prompt of audience, but we never would just take that for face value and drop it down, right? Remember, we want to do audience to the third power, so we always want to use a descriptor. We want to think the immediate audience and then the more broad audience. So think that this is televised, right? I mean, any presidential address is going to be televised, nationally, internationally, especially in an attack like this, okay? So turn to your partner, see if you can think about specific audiences that would hear or that need to hear or that he intends to hear this message. You got like a minute, go. All right. Who are some audiences that we can identify?
First responders.
Okay, good. All right, what else? Jake, did you have another one?
New York City.
Okay, so we have to be more specific.
People that were like in the attack.
Okay, so you could say like Americans that were in the attack. I don't want to say like in is not the right word, but it's fine for now. Survived, yeah. Who else? What else can we identify?
Family that's wondering. Family that has family that's in the
Family. So families that have lost. Like members of their family, okay?
Scared, like citizens.
Okay, yep, scared Americans would work. What else?
The military.
Yep. So we can say the American military. Okay. We're only focused right now on America. What else? Crosby. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like, for the terrorist, I would say that we don't have to have a descriptor for them because that's not, like, general, right? Who else would be paying attention to this message outside of us?
Other countries?
Be specific.
Other world leaders.
Okay, other world leaders. You could also identify other countries as what? Our. And if we have allies, we also have. Right? Because we're thinking something that is like internationally televised. And when a dominant world power is attacked, everybody's going to pay attention. Okay, so notice that like we went beyond 3, which is good. You don't want to spend too much time like figuring it out, but if these start coming to you pretty easily, you want to write it down, because the deeper we go into audience, when we get into evidence, we can take a piece of evidence and analyze how that evidence impacts each different audience, because it's interpreted differently by each one. All right, let's talk about obstacles. Think about him and his role. What obstacles in this situation must he overcome? Turn to your partner. You got like a minute. Go. All right. What obstacles does he need to overcome? JB?
His emotions and American emotions.
Okay. So, yes. So a couple of things, and I'm just kind of like cutting this off before we see it later. So when we talk about public speakers like this, right, one thing they have to overcome, we would never write down their fear of speaking in public. Like that's not what we want to write down, right? Because y'all may feel that way, but like people that do this all the time don't feel that all the time. So JB, when you're talking about like his emotions, like tell me like what do you mean by that?
Like he's probably angry right now based on the attack, so he has to just be mindful of what he's going to say.
Okay, yeah. So like his emotions about the attack, yeah. So you would say like his anger, his fear, yeah. That makes sense.
He has to calm down America, like American citizens, like make sure they're like.
So what is the obstacle that he has to overcome to do that?
He has to convince them that it's gonna be all good. Like we're gonna be safe.
Okay.
After this, I guess. Like it's not gonna happen again.
That's what he has to do to overcome it. But what's the obstacle that he has to overcome? Do you see what I'm saying?
Not really.
What is the obstacle that he has to overcome? You're telling me what he needs to do, but it's not the obstacle.
Like what comes next? The next step.
I'll make sure that
Go on. Like not alarm.
Okay, so the obstacle that he has to overcome is the fear of Americans, like future attacks, right? So we don't want to talk about what he has to do. We have to talk about the obstacle itself.
He has to be careful on his words because everybody has eyes on him.
Okay, so, and that's every time that we speak, but I know where you're going. So I have to say, let's say he has to balance what? Why does he have to be careful? He has to balance what? I mean, anytime a world leader speaks, we know everybody's going to be watching them. So that's too broad, too general. So
It's a balance of what he's saying to like calling the American citizens down, but while also like talking to the enemies.
okay, so he has to balance the idea of like calming citizens, but balance that with
Like
approaching.
being like firm and like saying that America's strong or something.
so like if it so he has to address the attack, right? So he has to calm Americans, but he has to address that attack. What is the immediate reaction that as an American we would probably want?
You want to get him back?
Yeah, like we want revenge, right? So he has to balance this idea of like trying to calm the American people, but also you should not be presidential and show this sense of revenge, seeking revenge. Obviously we have to do something, right? But he can't come across as vengeful because that doesn't bode well to other world leaders, right? But he has to show some kind of strength, right? Okay, that makes sense. All right, so now let's talk about leverage. Not promises. What leverages does he have? What can he use to leverage the American people to get them to understand this our strength? Talk to your partner. You got like 1 minute. Go.
So since he's president, he probably just like he's president, right? He kind of has
So you said like
All right. What does he need to leverage? What can he leverage in order to overcome these obstacles? You want to think about, look at the audience. Look at what we wrote about him. What can he leverage? JB?
I mean, he has control, so pretty much he's doing things that will give them a sense that they're going to find the attackers or stuff like that.
Okay, so he can leverage his knowledge as a president, right? He can leverage his role and power as a world leader. Okay. What else can he leverage?
Military.
Yep. He can leverage the strength of our military. And he could leverage the strength of our military physically, but also in the sense that it could reassure the American people, right?
Yeah.
What else? Yep. He can leverage the relationship with our allies. Yep. What else can he leverage?
Unity.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for. So, this sense of unity or patriotism. I hear people talk about nationalism. I need you to, if we start talking about nationalism, I need you to look up the definition for what nationalism is. That is not this. But it is absolutely, he would, and it sounds weird to use that sense of unity or patriotism, but y'all have never experienced our country be as unified and have this immense sense of patriotism as we did months after 9/11. So that month up, a few months after we were unified against this one entity, right? Y'all have never been in an environment like that in this country. It's sad to say, but it's true. So that's one thing that he can leverage at that time. Okay? Let's talk about exigence. Remember, we want to go further. The immediate, easy part of this exigence is what? Why this message now?
Because it just happened.
Okay, so the attacks, right? So that's the easy go-to. But remember, we want to say why this message at this time to this audience. Specifically, we can go up and say, that's where I go, oh, that's why the time might have been referenced. So what's the exigence for him giving the message at 8:30 that night?
Because
People are watching TV and sitting on with their watching their news and stuff.
maybe everyone's home, from their
That's
job.
exactly what she just
Oh,
said.
sorry, my bad.
You could have had more information.
Okay, there we go. So realize that day, I was teaching that day, and people started pulling their kids out of school as soon as people started to realize that it was an attack on us, a purposeful attack. People started pulling their kids out of school, right? So I was coaching then. That day, like, we had no games. We didn't have games even till the following Tuesday, right? So like the following week, we didn't have any games. There were no flights. There were no airports open. There was nothing, right? So everybody was home by 1 o'clock that afternoon, right? Literally, businesses shut down. Everybody just went home. So the reason why he waited was, say that again. Yeah, he had to make sure that he had all the information. He also had to make sure that he had all the information and what?
Correct.
Well, yeah. That what?
Is it in the plan?
Probably maybe a start of it. But why that night? He had information at noon. He had information at 2. Why did he have to wait till that night? That it was what? Yeah. So he had to make sure the U.S. was safe and that the attacks were over. That makes sense, right? Like, he had to make sure that that all of our transportation was shut down, that our economy was safe and going to be able to recover, that our infrastructure, right? He had to make sure that all those things were happening so that when he got on, you don't want a president that gets on and goes, oh, I hope everything's going to be okay. We're still kind of working out the kinks on, like, whether our economy is going to be okay and whether, like, you don't want somebody to get on at night after this kind of attack and not know, like, the strength of our country and where we are, right? Okay, so let's talk about context. We know that it is, we can steal a couple of things, right? So we know it's 9 months into his presidency. You don't know much about early 2000. Our economy is good. What do we not have pre 9/11?
Sorry.
We did have cell phones. Careful.
TSA?
Oh, yeah, there you go. We did have telephones. Alexander Graham Bell had those, but yes, we did have cell phones. So we did. There was no airport security. We just ran willy-nilly through the airport. Actually, it's so weird to think, right? We could, like, when family members or friends would leave, it was natural to take them to the airport, go sit with them at the gate, and wave as their plane flew off, right? Then you would leave. You can park your car right at the gate, like right in those, like where everybody continues to drive. You could just park your car there, walk inside, and wait for your person to come out. You didn't have to weigh your bags. You didn't have to put certain amounts of liquid in bags. You could just do whatever. You could smoke all the way through the airport up to the terminal on the gate in the airplane, right? So none of that was happening. I think we did stop smoking. Not me, like them, like around this early, late 70s, 80s, somewhere around there. So that's some of the context that we want, that would be important for us to kind of understand with this. Okay, so our purpose. Remember, our purpose we find in the task. So, put your finger on the prompt, and the part of the prompt that is your task. Where is your purpose in the task? Where is the purpose in the task? Now tell your Now tell your partner, 48, it's going to be tough for me. Tell your partner, is it the understand or the do? Talk to your partner, go.
I think it as well. They like to understand that
I say understand because it's wanting you to understand how the choices that you
All right. What is the purpose? To do what? Nope.
Reaffirm country strength.
Reaffirm the country's strength. That is your purpose. This, the analyze, is what we call a rhetorically accurate verb. You'll learn about RAV, a rhetorically accurate verb. So your purpose always comes after that, right? All right, so now reaffirm the country's strength. We always underlined it. We either get the understand or the do in our prompts. So, which one is it?
Understand.
It is the understand. So I always label it. Now for our boxes, we want to go, I want you to write down the whole purpose. So, and don't paraphrase it. So reaffirm the country's strength. Right? That is from the prompt. So, the second part, this do part, we get after we read. We will usually have to infer what the do is. Now, I will give you a prompt where we have the do. So don't always think that you're going to get the understand. Sometimes we'll get the do. Right? Okay. That's all I got for you for today.